Jordan Franklin clutched his first-class ticket, heart pounding as the gate agent's eyes skimmed over his dark skin before dismissing him without a word. "Economy's that way," she snapped, not bothering to verify his boarding pass. At 16, he'd faced prejudice before, but never this blatant. Never with 14-year-old Imani watching wide-eyed beside him. The siblings stood their ground, only to have security called, a supervisor summoned, and their dignity stripped away beneath fluorescent airport lights. The airline staff smirked, confident in their power, never suspecting these teenagers were about to shatter their world with a single message. For while Jordan and Imani appeared vulnerable, they possessed the one thing that truly mattered in corporate America: a father named Darius Franklin, the airline's majority owner, whose response to his children's mistreatment would transform an industry overnight. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The morning light streamed through the windows of the modest suburban home as Jordan Franklin stuffed the last of his clothes into his carry-on bag. At 16, he was tall for his age, with a quiet intensity that made people notice him, even when he wasn't trying to be noticed. His sister Imani, 14 and artistic to her core, was already waiting by the door, her sketchbook tucked under her arm as always. "You got everything?" asked Helen, their godmother, her eyes misting over slightly. "First aid kit? Chargers? Emergency contacts?" "Yes, Auntie Helen," Imani said with a gentle smile. "We've gone over the list 3 times. Helen pulled them both into a tight embrace. "Your father would be so proud seeing you two heading off on your own like this. He's worked so hard to give you these opportunities." Jordan nodded, his expression serious. "We know. That's why we're not going to mess it up." For the past decade, Helen had raised them while their father, Darius Franklin, built his business empire overseas. The siblings had seen him only during holidays and brief visits, but his presence remained constant through video calls and the opportunities he provided. This trip, their first solo journey to visit him at his newest acquisition, felt like a milestone, a recognition of their growing maturity. "The car's here," Jordan announced, peering through the curtains as a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway. Helen fussed over them one last time, straightening Jordan's collar and tucking a strand of hair behind Imani's ear. "Remember what your father always says: stand tall, speak clearly, and never let anyone make you feel small," the siblings recited in unison, a mantra they'd grown up hearing. Helen kissed them both on the forehead. "Text me when you land. And Jordan, watch out for your sister." "Always do," he replied, grabbing both their suitcases. The drive to the airport was filled with excited chatter about what they would do first when they arrived. Imani wanted to visit the art district their father had mentioned, while Jordan was more interested in seeing the tech hub that had attracted so many investors to the region. "Dad said there's this innovation center where they're testing next-gen communication systems," Jordan said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I want to check out their security protocols." Imani rolled her eyes affectionately. "Of course you do, Mr. Hacker. I just want to see the murals in the old quarter." Dad said some of them date back 100 years. As they approached the departure terminal, Jordan checked their tickets on his phone one more time. "First class, gate A17, boarding in 2 hours. We've got plenty of time." The siblings thanked their driver and entered the bustling airport with the confidence that came from frequent family trips, despite this being their first big journey alone. Jordan led the way, navigating through the crowd toward the first-class check-in counter. As they approached the premium line, a gate agent, with bleached blonde hair and a tight smile, looked them up and down. Her name tag read, Leslie. Without checking their tickets, she gestured toward the economy line several yards away. "Regular check-in is over there," she said crisply. Jordan stopped, confused. "We're flying first class." He held up his phone to show their boarding passes. Leslie's smile tightened. "I'm sorry, but that line is for verified first-class passengers only." We are verified first-class passengers, Jordan insisted, keeping his voice even despite the frustration beginning to build. Our father booked these tickets weeks ago. Leslie leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Look, those tickets look unusual. They might be fake boarding passes. It happens more than you'd think. Imani tugged at her brother's sleeve. Jordan, maybe we should just— No, Jordan said firmly. We have every right to be in this line. He tried to remain calm, remembering his father's advice about handling difficult situations. Discreetly, he tapped his smartwatch, activating its recording function. Leslie's eyes narrowed. I'm going to need to verify these. Wait here. She walked away, speaking quietly into her headset. Jordan and Imani exchanged glances. A few feet away, a white family with teenagers approached the same first-class line and was welcomed with a warm smile by another agent. Did you see that? Jordan whispered. Imani nodded, her artist's eye missing nothing. Different tone, different body language, different everything. Leslie returned moments later with a practiced smile and a man in a crisp uniform beside her. This is Officer Reeves. He'll need to verify your documentation in a more private area. By now, other passengers were staring. An older white woman in a designer coat whispered audibly to her husband. Probably trying to sneak in again. Happens all the time. Jordan felt his chest tighten but kept his voice steady. We're not going anywhere private. Our tickets are valid. You can verify them right here. Officer Reeves, a stocky man with thinning hair and tired eyes, sighed as if this was routine. Kids, we're just trying to avoid disrupting other passengers. Let's step aside and sort this out properly. Imani, always the peacemaker, looked ready to comply, but Jordan stood his ground. We're not kids. We're paying customers with valid tickets. The tension was interrupted by the arrival of another man, older, with a receding hairline and a supervisor's badge that read, Travis. His face was flushed with barely contained irritation. What seems to be the problem here? He asked, though his tone suggested he'd already decided who was causing the trouble. Leslie quickly explained. These two insist they have first-class tickets, but the passes look suspicious. They're refusing verification. Travis didn't even look at the siblings as he spoke. Look, you're causing a scene here. Either step aside with Officer Reeves or wait outside until we can properly verify your booking. Jordan held up his phone again. Our booking confirmation is right here. Our father purchased these tickets directly from your airline's executive portal. Executive portal? Travis scoffed. Right, and I'm the CEO. Our ID matches the names. On the tickets, Imani added quietly, pulling out her driver's license. Travis finally glanced at them, his gaze dismissive. Even if these tickets are somehow real, which I doubt, there's clearly been some kind of mistake. This class of service, it's not what you're used to. The implication hung in the air, unmistakable. Jordan felt his fists clench at his sides. He wanted to shout, to demand respect, but years of his father's cautioning held him back. Making a scene would only reinforce their prejudices. We've shown you everything you need, Jordan said, his voice tight. Either check us in or get your manager. Travis's face hardened. I am the floor supervisor, and I'm telling you to step aside. Wait outside or security will remove you from the terminal entirely. Imani's eyes widened with alarm. Jordan could feel her trembling slightly beside him. Fine, Jordan said, his voice dangerously calm. We'll step aside. As they moved away from the counter, Jordan pulled out his phone and opened a secure messaging app. His father had given it to him years ago, saying, "Use this if you ever need me immediately. No matter where I am, I'll respond." He typed a brief message. Airport. First-class counter. Racial profiling. Recording everything. No immediate response came through. Jordan pocketed his phone and looked at his sister. Imani forced a smile, ever the optimist. Let's try to fix this ourselves first. Dad's probably in meetings. They walked toward a quieter area of the terminal, both aware of the security officer still watching them from a distance. "This isn't right," Jordan muttered. "I'm not letting this go." "I know," Imani replied softly. "But right now, we need to be smart about how we handle it." The siblings found a bench near some vending machines, away from the crowded gates but still within view of their departure screen. Imani pulled out her sketchbook, her way of processing emotion, while Jordan began researching airline policies on his phone, determined to find their next move. On the pages of Imani's sketchbook, harsh lines began to form the scene they'd just experienced. Jordan noticed her hand trembling slightly. "You okay?" he asked gently. Imani nodded, not looking up. "Just angry. But I'd rather put it down on paper than let it eat me up inside." Jordan squeezed her shoulder. "Smart girl. Dad would be proud." He returned to his phone, pulling up passenger rights documents and taking screenshots of key sections. "There's got to be something here we can use." Nearby, a family with young children watched them with barely disguised curiosity. Jordan overheard the mother whispering something about unaccompanied minors and security concerns. "They think we're troublemakers," Imani whispered, also noticing the stares. "Let them think what they want," Jordan replied. "We know the truth." His phone suddenly vibrated, a news alert about flight delays due to weather conditions at their destination. Jordan's heart sank. If the flight was delayed, they'd be stuck here even longer. "I'm going to check the status board," he told Imani. "Stay here, okay?" As Jordan approached the large digital display, he noticed Officer Reeves speaking with another security guard while glancing in his direction. They were being watched. Jordan pretended not to notice, scanning the board for their flight information. No delays posted yet, but several other flights to nearby cities had been pushed back by hours. When he returned to the bench, Imani was no longer alone. An elderly black woman in a wheelchair had positioned herself nearby and was engaged in conversation with his sister. "Just like that every single time," the woman was saying as Jordan approached. 40 years of flying and they still act like I don't belong." "This is my brother, Jordan," Imani said, gesturing as he sat down. "Jordan, this is Ms. Eva Montgomery. She's having the same problem we are." Eva Montgomery had the kind of dignified presence that commanded respect without asking for it. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and though her body might have weakened with age, her eyes were sharp and alert, missing nothing. "Pleased to meet you, young man," she said, extending a hand adorned with a single gold ring. "Your sister was just telling me about your encounter with our friends at the counter." Jordan shook her hand. "You too, ma'am. Sounds like you've been dealing with the same thing." Eva chuckled, but there was little humor in it. "Child, I've been dealing with this since before your parents were born. They moved me from the first-class lounge claiming they needed to verify my status. Been waiting here for 40 minutes while white passengers walk right in." "That's horrible," Imani said, her brow furrowing with indignation. "It's life," Eva replied matter-of-factly. "But that doesn't mean we accept it." She looked Jordan up and down. "You remind me of my grandson. Same fire in the eyes." Jordan smiled despite his frustration. "My dad always says that fire is good as long as you control it, not the other way around. Smart man, your father. Is he meeting you at your destination?" "That's the plan," Imani said. "It's our first trip to see him in his new location. He's been working overseas." As they spoke, a young Latino man in a janitor's uniform approached, pushing his cleaning cart. He slowed as he neared them, glancing around before speaking in a low voice. "Don't mean to interrupt, but I heard what happened. This happens all the time." He introduced himself as Leo. "My cousin Maria works customer service. Not the front desk, the real one where they can actually help. Here." He slipped them a small piece of paper with a name and terminal location. "Ask for Daniela. She doesn't play their games." Before they could thank him properly, Leo was moving on, but not before discreetly leaving a few packaged snacks on the bench beside them. Well, Eva said with a small smile, it seems not everyone here is cut from the same cloth. Jordan opened his phone to check their ticket status and froze. What the hell? The screen displayed their booking information with a glaring update. Cancelled due to verification failure. We didn't cancel anything, Imani said, peering over his shoulder. No, but someone did. Jordan's tech savvy, honed through years of coding and system design lessons online, kicked into high gear. He opened a developer portal on his phone and began working through a series of commands. What are you doing? Eva asked, watching his fingers fly across the screen, accessing the airline's mobile backend. Most companies have security flaws in their apps if you know where to look. His face lit up with grim satisfaction. Got it. Someone manually altered our ticket status at 9:42 a.m., right after we walked away from the counter. He took screenshots of the timestamp and user ID, storing them securely. Evidence, he muttered. We're going to need it. I think we should try that customer service desk Leo mentioned, Imani suggested. Maybe Daniela can help restore our tickets. They helped Eva navigate toward the central terminal where Daniela supposedly worked. As they moved, Jordan became aware of two security guards casually following them at a distance. Don't look back, he whispered to Imani, who had noticed the same thing. Just keep walking normally. Eva, sensing their tension, spoke calmly. Been shadowed more times than I can count. Straight backs, steady pace. Give them nothing to work with. The main customer service hub was crowded with frustrated travelers dealing with delays and cancellations. After waiting in line for 20 minutes, they reached the desk only to be met by a young man with a harried expression. Not Daniela. Daniela's on break, he said after they asked for her. I can help you. His name tag read Kevin, Jordan explained. Their situation, showing him the screenshots of their altered ticket status. Kevin's eyes widened momentarily before his face settled into practiced neutrality. I'm sorry, but it looks like our system is experiencing issues right now. I can't access your booking. His fingers never touched his keyboard. His eyes never looked at his screen. The lie was so transparent that even Imani's patience began to wear thin. You didn't even try to look it up, she pointed out. Kevin's smile remained fixed. Like I said, system issues. Maybe try again in a few hours? Next, please. As they stepped away from the desk, Eva sighed heavily. I need to rest these old bones. For a bit. You two go on. I'll wait here. We're not leaving you, Imani insisted, her natural compassion overriding her own frustration. They found a row of seats where Eva could rest while they regrouped. Jordan continued working on his phone, trying different approaches to recover their ticket information. Imani decided to go get some water for Eva, who was looking increasingly tired. I'll be right back, she promised, heading toward a nearby cafe. As she approached the cafe, Imani overheard familiar voices around the corner. Leslie, the gate agent from earlier, was speaking to another airline employee. Instinctively, Imani slowed her pace, staying just out of sight. Can't believe. They actually thought they could pull it off, Leslie was saying with a laugh. What kind of rich dad lets their street kids run wild like this? Probably stole someone's credit card to book those tickets. Did you see their faces when Travis showed up? The other employee responded. Priceless. He's got a reputation for handling these situations. By these situations, you mean? Leslie's voice lowered. You know exactly what I mean, came the reply, followed by more laughter. Imani stood frozen, the conversation burning into her memory. She wanted to confront them, to defend her family's dignity, but years of careful conditioning held her back. Instead, she quickly grabbed water bottles and returned to Jordan and Eva, her hands shaking slightly. What's wrong? Jordan asked immediately, noticing her distress. Imani hesitated, glancing at Eva. I overheard Leslie talking. She called us street kids and implied we stole someone's credit card to book the tickets. Jordan's expression darkened. Did you record it? No, I wasn't prepared. Imani looked down. I should have, but I was too shocked. Eva reached out and patted Imani's hand. You did fine, child. Sometimes the most powerful thing is just to witness and remember. Jordan nodded, though his jaw was tight with anger. I'm going to check if Dad responded yet. He pulled out his phone and checked the secure messaging app. Still no response. He'll answer, Imani said with confidence she didn't entirely feel. He always does eventually. Jordan was about to reply when Eva suddenly straightened in her wheelchair. I need to use the restroom. Would you mind helping me get there, dear? Right. Course, Imani said. I'll take you. No need to both come, Eva insisted. I'm sure this young man has plenty to do with his investigation. I just need a push to get there, then I can manage. Reluctantly, Jordan stayed behind with their belongings while Imani wheeled Eva toward the nearest restrooms. The lines were long, and a sign indicated that the accessible stall was out of order. Maybe we should try another restroom, Imani suggested. Eva shook her head. This will have to do. I'll just need to stand for a bit. They waited their turn, but when they reached the front of the line, a TSA agent approached them. Wheelchair needs to go through separate screening, he said abruptly. I'm just taking her to the restroom, Imani explained. Policy, the agent insisted. She needs to stand and walk through the scanner. She can't stand for long periods, Imani protested. The exchange grew heated, drawing attention from passers-by. Eva, determined to maintain her dignity, attempted to stand as requested. But after being forced to wait several minutes for the agent to finish a conversation with a colleague, her legs gave way. Ms. Eva! Imani cried as the elderly woman collapsed to the floor. The TSA agent looked panicked, suddenly realizing the severity of the situation. I was just following protocol. Someone help! Imani shouted, kneeling beside Eva, who was conscious but clearly in distress. Jordan, who had followed at a distance to keep an eye on them, pushed through the gathering crowd. What happened? He demanded, immediately dropping to Eva's side. They made her stand too long, Imani explained, tears welling in her eyes. I told them she couldn't. Jordan looked up at the TSA agent with cold fury. Call medical! Now! The agent fumbled with his radio, finally calling for assistance. People stood watching but doing nothing as Eva lay on the floor, her breathing labored, but her eyes still alert. I'm fine, she insisted, though she clearly wasn't. Just need to catch my breath. EMTs arrived minutes later, quickly assessing Eva's condition and helping her back into her wheelchair. Blood pressure's elevated, one of them noted. We should take her to the medical station for monitoring. As they prepared to move Eva, Jordan felt a cold rage building within him. Not the hot, impulsive anger of youth, but something deeper and more controlled. He raised his smartwatch again, recording everything, capturing the indifferent faces of the airline staff watching from a distance, the embarrassed but unapologetic expression of the TSA agent, the curious onlookers treating human suffering like a spectator sport. With deliberate precision, he composed another message to his father. You warned them once, now it's your move. This time, his phone pinged almost immediately with a response. A single word from Darius Franklin. Engaged. Jordan looked at Imani, who was holding Eva's hand and speaking softly to her as the EMTs prepared to take her to the airport's medical station. What did Dad say? Imani asked, looking up at her brother with tear-streaked cheeks. He's coming, Jordan replied, a grim smile spreading across his face. And he's bringing the storm with him. Eva, despite her discomfort, caught the exchange. Your father, she said quietly. Who exactly is he? Jordan leaned down close to her ear. Darius Franklin. Eva's eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning. The Darius Franklin? Of Langston Holdings? Jordan nodded once, his expression solemn. A slow smile spread across Eva's face. Well, well, she murmured. This just got interesting. As the EMTs wheeled Eva away, Imani at her side, Jordan remained standing in the middle of the terminal, his posture straight and confident for the first time since they'd arrived. A single silent tear ran down his cheek, not of sadness or fear, but of righteous anger finally finding its purpose. He glanced toward the first-class check-in counter where Leslie and Travis were now helping other passengers, oblivious to the forces aligning against them. Jordan allowed himself a small smile. "You should have just checked our tickets," he whispered to himself. "But now you'll have to answer to him." As Ava was wheeled toward the medical station, Jordan and Imani followed close behind, their original travel plans now completely derailed. Jordan's phone buzzed with a notification from the secure messaging app. Unlike the single-word response from before, this time it was a full message. "Facial recognition accessed. Location confirmed. Stay visible. Do not engage further with staff. Protect Eva. I have eyes on you now." Jordan showed the message to Imani, whose eyes widened. "Dad has access to the airport cameras?" she whispered. "Dad has access to everything," Jordan replied with newfound confidence. "Remember when he told us about the backdoor protocols he built into his acquisitions?" Imani nodded slowly. "I thought that was just him bragging." "Apparently not." Jordan pocketed his phone, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Now we wait. Miles away in a sleek, windowless command center, Darius Franklin sat surrounded by monitors. At 45, he had the lean, poised look of a man who had fought his way to success through sheer force of will. His dark eyes, so like Jordan's, scanned the displays with laser focus as his fingers flew across multiple keyboards. "Begin compliance audit sequence," he commanded into a headset. "Authorization code, Layla Phoenix 7729. A female voice responded from the speakers. "Compliance audit initiated. Target systems, Northern Skies Airlines. Access level, executive override." Darius leaned back slightly as data began flooding his screens. Passenger manifests, employee records, security feeds from multiple airports nationwide. On one monitor he could see his children sitting beside Eva's hospital bed, Jordan's arm protectively around Imani's shoulders. "Initiate Phase 1, Darius said, his voice deadly calm. "Protocol 17. Back at the airport, Jordan's phone pinged with an automated alert. He opened it to find a notification from the Airline's app. "Flight NS1.29 delayed. New estimated departure. Pending system verification." "Look," he showed Imani. "It's starting." "What's starting?" Imani asked, confusion clouding her features. Before Jordan could answer, more alerts began popping up on his phone, flight delays spreading across the terminal like ripples in a pond. On the main departure board, status indicators flickered, from green to yellow to red. Announcements began playing over the PA system about temporary system issues and verification protocols. "Dad's inside their system," Jordan whispered. "He's locking them out." Eva, who had been listening from her hospital bed, chuckled softly despite her discomfort. "Your father isn't messing around, is he?" Across the airport, confusion was spreading. Passengers were lining up at information desks, demanding explanations for the sudden delays. Gate agents were frantically calling supervisors, who were calling managers, who were finding their access credentials suddenly invalid. At Northern Skies corporate headquarters, the situation was rapidly evolving from confusion to panic. In the main conference room, executives huddled around displays showing cascading system failures across their network. "What do you mean you can't override it?" demanded Victor Reynolds, the airline's chief operations officer. "You're the head of IT." The IT director, a harried-looking man with sweat staining his collar, shook his head frantically. "Someone's locked us out of our own systems. Every time we bypass one firewall, another one appears. It's like the system is rewriting itself in real time." "That's impossible," Victor snapped. "Systems don't rewrite themselves." Just then, every screen in the room flickered and went black. After a moment of stunned silence, white text began appearing on the dark background. "Emergency compliance protocol activated by Langston Holdings, majority shareholder." Article 17 enforcement in progress. Stand by for system-wide audit. Quine. Room erupted in chaos. Langston Holdings? Isn't that Darius Franklin? Jesus Christ. Why would he trigger an emergency compliance audit without warning? The CEO, William Palmer, a silver-haired man with an perpetual tan, slammed his hand on the table. Someone get Franklin on the phone right now. As the executive scrambled, a junior analyst quietly pulled up an archived news article on her tablet and slid it toward her supervisor. The headline read, "Tech mogul's wife dies after denied boarding. Airline cites security concerns." The date was 10 years earlier. The airline was a smaller company that had since been acquired by Northern Skies. "Oh my God," the supervisor murmured, scanning the article. Franklin's wife was profiled and denied boarding when she needed emergency medical attention. She died waiting for another flight, and now his children are being profiled at one of our gates, the analyst added quietly. The supervisor looked up, face pale. "We're so screwed." In the airport medical center, Jordan was searching through archived news articles on his phone, his expression growing increasingly somber. "I never knew," he said quietly to Imani. "About Mom. About how she died." Imani leaned over to look at his screen, her artistic hands trembling slightly as she took in the headline. "Dad never told us the details. Just that it was an accident." "It wasn't an accident," Jordan replied, his voice hard. "It was negligence and prejudice." He scrolled through more articles, absorbing the painful truth. She was denied boarding because they thought her diabetes emergency was suspicious behavior. By the time she got medical help, it was too late. Imani's eyes filled with tears. "And now it's happening again. To us. To Ms. Eva." Eva, who had been pretending to sleep, opened her eyes. "Your mother's name was Layla, wasn't it? I remember that case. It was one of the reasons I started advocating for travel rights." Jordan looked up surprised. "You knew about this?" "Child, I've been fighting these battles for decades," Eva said gently. "Your mother's case was a landmark one for many of us. I just never made the connection to your father until now." Before they could discuss it further, Jordan's phone chimed with another alert. This one was different. A news notification. "Breaking. Northern Skies Airlines grounds all flights for emergency system inspection." "All flights," Imani gasped. "Dad shut down the entire airline?" "Not just the flights," Jordan murmured, reading further. "Look, air traffic control is redirecting their entire fleet. Planes already in the air are being diverted to the nearest airports." Eva let out a low whistle. "Your father isn't just sending a message, he's declaring war." Meanwhile, at the first-class check-in counter, Leslie was dealing with increasingly irate passengers as the system continued to malfunction. Her supervisor, Travis, approached with a thunderous expression. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Nothing's working." "I don't know," Leslie replied, her composure cracking. "The entire network is locked up." Travis lowered his voice. "Listen, I just got word from upstairs. This might be connected to those two kids from earlier." Leslie stared at him. "What? How could two teenagers crash our entire system?" "I don't know, but they want us to delete any records of the incident. All of it. Security footage, boarding pass verifications, everything." Leslie glanced around nervously. "Why would we do that unless they're connected to someone important?" Travis finished for her. "Just do it. I'll handle security." As they hurriedly began covering their tracks, neither noticed the janitor, Leo, watching from nearby, recording everything on his phone. Outside the terminal, news vans were beginning to arrive, drawn by reports of the unprecedented airline shutdown. Among them was a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. The driver, a woman in a tailored suit, spoke quietly into her earpiece. "Eagle has landed. Proceeding to medical bay." Inside the vehicle, Darius Franklin closed his laptop. Time to see my children, he said to no one in particular, his voice both tender and dangerous. In the medical center, Jordan received one final message from his father. I'm here. Jordan and Imani exchanged glances, a mixture of relief and apprehension on their young faces. Their father was a loving but distant figure in their lives, always providing, always protecting, but rarely present. Now he was about to make an entrance that would change everything. Is that him? Imani whispered, nodding toward the entrance, where a tall, imposing figure had appeared, flanked by serious-looking men and women in professional attire. Jordan nodded, a lump forming in his throat. That's Dad. Darius Franklin strode into the medical center with the confident gait of a man who owned every inch of ground beneath his feet. His tailored suit was impeccable, his face impassive except for the slight softening of his eyes when they landed on his children. Jordan. Imani, he said simply, his deep voice carrying across the room. The siblings rose to meet him, suddenly unsure whether to embrace him or stand at attention. Darius solved the dilemma by opening his arms, and they rushed into his embrace. I'm sorry it took me so long, he murmured into their hair. But I'm here now. After a moment, he released them and turned his attention to Ava, who was watching the family reunion with interest. Ms. Montgomery, he said with a respectful nod. I understand my children have been keeping you company. I hope you're receiving proper care now. Eva studied him curiously. Mr. Franklin, I see where your son gets his intensity. Yes, your children have been exemplary. Far better than the staff of your airline. Not for much longer, Darius replied grimly. Rest assured, this ends today. He turned to one of his associates, a stern-looking woman with a tablet. Begin phase 2, he instructed. I want every employee involved in today's incident assembled at gate A17 in 15 minutes. Every single one. As the woman nodded and stepped away to make calls, Darius addressed his children again. Are you two ready for what comes next? This won't be pleasant. Jordan straightened his shoulders. We're ready, Dad. They need to be held accountable. Imani hesitated, then nodded. I just want them to understand what they did wrong, so it doesn't happen to anyone else. Darius's expression softened slightly at his daughter's compassion. Understanding will come, one way or another. He checked his watch. It's time. Let's go. As Darius and his entourage prepared to leave, Eva called out, Mr. Franklin. Darius turned, one eyebrow raised inquiringly. Make it count, Eva said simply. Darius nodded once, then led his children out of the medical center and toward gate A17, where their confrontation with the airline staff awaited. As they walked through the terminal, passengers and airport employees stopped to stare at the procession. Some recognized Darius, taking out their phones to record the mogul's unexpected appearance. In Darius's ear, a voice reported, Sir, Leslie Matthews and Travis Wilson are attempting to leave the premises. Security has been instructed to hold them at the gate. Perfect, Darius replied quietly. Into his earpiece he added, Stage 2, begin shutdown protocol. Throughout the terminal, lights flickered as the airport's backup generators kicked in. On every display screen, the airline's logo was replaced by the Langston Holdings emblem, a phoenix rising from ashes. The message was clear. A new power had taken control. In a quiet corner of the Northern Skies employee break room, Travis Wilson sat alone, his head in his hands. The chaos unfolding throughout the terminal seemed distant compared to the turmoil in his own mind. On his phone, he repeatedly watched the security footage of himself confronting Jordan and Imani earlier that day. Why didn't I just check their damn tickets? He muttered to himself, rewinding the footage to watch his own dismissive gestures, his refusal to make eye contact with the teenagers. The way he'd treated them reminded him painfully of another failure in his life. 8 years ago, Travis had lost his only son, Marcus, to a heroin overdose. Marcus had been 16, Jordan's age, when Travis had kicked him out of the house after discovering drugs in his room. Tough love, he'd told himself then. Marcus had died alone in a shelter 3 months later. Every time Travis saw young, black men Jordan's age, something in him reacted with a mixture of grief and judgment. It was easier to assume the worst than to remember his own failures as a father. A notification appeared on his screen, an all-staff message ordering personnel involved in the Franklin incident to report to Gate A17 immediately. Travis felt his stomach drop. Franklin. The name hadn't registered earlier, but now the connection was clear. Those kids were Darius Franklin's children. "I'm finished," he whispered to the empty room. In another part of the terminal, Leo Rodriguez wheeled his janitorial cart toward an employees-only door. At 26, Leo had the easygoing demeanor of someone who could blend into any background, becoming effectively invisible to those who didn't bother to look closely. This quality had served him well over the 3 years he'd worked at the Fring airport since dropping out of his logistics management program at State University. Leo swiped his badge and entered the staff corridor, quickly navigating to a small server room. Once inside, he locked the door behind him and pulled a laptop from beneath the supplies in his cart. Within minutes, he had connected to the airline's internal network, a trick he'd learned during his college days. "Access granted," he murmured with satisfaction as employee files appeared on his screen. He quickly began downloading personnel records, customer complaint histories, and internal memos about passenger profiling protocols. The documents painted a disturbing picture of systemic bias within the airline's operations. As the files transferred, Leo sent a text message to a contact listed simply as N. "Got everything. Meeting at Gate A17 is happening now. You might want to get over here." The recipient of that message, Naomi Jackson, was already on her way. At 34, Naomi had established herself as one of the most respected investigative journalists in the city. She was also Eva Montgomery's daughter, though few people made that connection professionally. In the newsroom of the City Tribune, Naomi had been about to head home when the first reports of the Northern Skies shutdown began flooding social media. A colleague had shown her a viral video of an elderly woman collapsing at a security checkpoint, her own mother. Now Naomi was in a taxi heading to the airport, her press credentials ready and her recorder running. Her phone pinged with Leo's message. "Gate A17, she instructed the driver, "and hurry." Meanwhile, in a secluded VIP lounge requisitioned by Darius's team, Jordan and Imani sat across from their father as he briefed them on what would happen next. "The confrontation will be public," Darius explained. "I want witnesses. I want accountability." He looked at Jordan. "Those recordings you made, they're admissible and legally obtained. I'm proud of your foresight." Jordan nodded, a surge of warmth spreading through his chest at his father's praise. "I just did what you taught us." Darius turned to Imani. "This will be difficult for you, I know. You've always been compassionate, like your mother." His voice caught slightly on the last word. "But sometimes justice requires discomfort." Imani nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "I understand. But Dad, what happens to the people who did this? To Leslie and Travis?" "That depends on them," Darius replied carefully. "On whether they can acknowledge their actions and commit to change." A knock at the door interrupted them. One of Darius's aides entered, tablet in hand. "Sir, we've received an interesting development. Someone from inside the airline has leaked documents to a journalist, extensive evidence of racial profiling, not just in this incident but system-wide." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Who's the journalist?" "Naomi Jackson, from the City Tribune." Jordan's eyes widened. "Jackson? As in Eva's daughter," Darius finished, a small smile playing at his lips. "This day gets more interesting by the minute." He stood, straightening his tie. "It's time." Gate A17, once designated for their departure, had been transformed into an impromptu tribunal. Airline staff, including Leslie and Travis, stood nervously near the counter while Darius's security team maintained a perimeter. Passengers gathered at a respectful distance, sensing that something unprecedented was unfolding. Some had their phones out, recording. As Darius approached with his children, the crowd parted like water. In the sudden quiet, his footsteps echoed against the polished floor. He stopped directly in front of the gate, surveying the assembled staff with an unnervingly calm expression. "I'd like to speak with the gate manager," he announced, his voice carrying without effort. Travis stepped forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by thinly veiled fear. "I'm the floor supervisor," he said, not quite meeting Darius's eyes. "Travis Wilson," Darius stated, rather than asked. "You work for me." Travis blinked in confusion. "Sir?" "You work for me," Darius repeated. "As of 3 months ago, when Langston Holdings acquired a controlling interest in Northern Skies Airlines, I am your majority shareholder, your chairman, and effectively, your boss." He gestured toward Jordan and Amani. "And these are my children, whom you humiliated, discriminated against, and attempted to remove from my airline earlier today." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Leslie, standing slightly behind Travis, visibly paled. At that moment, a woman with a press badge pushed through the crowd, followed by a cameraman. "Naomi Jackson, City Tribune," she announced, holding up a recorder. "Mr. Franklin, would you care to comment on the unprecedented grounding of Northern Skies' entire fleet?" Darius smiled thinly. "Perfect timing, Ms. Jackson. I was just about to address that." He turned to face both the assembled staff and the growing audience of travelers. "Today, my children experienced something that no passenger should ever face. Discrimination, based on the color of their skin." Leslie stepped forward, her professional mask firmly in place. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. We were simply following security protocols." "Save it," Jordan interrupted, surprising everyone, including himself, with the authority in his voice. "I recorded everything." He raised his smartwatch. "Including when you redirected us from the first-class line without checking our tickets, when you accused us of having fake boarding passes, and when you called security to have us removed." As Jordan spoke, Leo emerged from the crowd, positioning himself near Naomi. Something in his posture caught Imani's attention, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there earlier when he was pushing his janitorial cart. Darius continued, "While my son was recording your visible misconduct, my systems were recording something else. The deliberate cancellation of their valid tickets after they walked away, the security flags added to their profiles without cause, and the internal communications, suggesting this was standard procedure rather than an isolated incident." Travis attempted to defend himself. "Mr. Franklin, with all due respect, your children were being aggressive. Were they?" Darius raised an eyebrow. He gestured to a nearby screen, which suddenly displayed crystal-clear footage from Jordan's smartwatch. The video showed the entire interaction, including Travis's dismissive behavior and thinly veiled threats. As the footage played, Jordan stepped forward. "I also captured audio you didn't know I was recording." He tapped his watch again, and Travis's voice filled the gate area. "That they don't belong here. Make sure they're escorted out before they cause more trouble." The crowd murmured in shock and disgust. Travis's face contorted with a mixture of shame and defiance. "This isn't just about my children," Darius continued. "This is about a pattern of behavior that has gone unchecked for too long." He nodded to another aide, who distributed tablets to the senior staff members present. "On these devices, you'll find documentation of over 300 similar incidents in the past year alone, all conveniently categorized as security concerns rather than what they really are, racial profiling." As the executive scrolled through the damning evidence, phones began ringing throughout the group. One of them, a woman in a tailored suit who had flown in from headquarters, whispered urgently to her colleague, "3 board members just resigned, effective immediately. The stock is in free fall." Naomi, who had been recording everything, stepped closer to Imani. "Would you be willing to share your experience on camera?" she asked quietly. "People need to hear this from you directly." Imani hesitated, looking to her father and brother for guidance. Jordan nodded encouragingly, but Darius remained neutral, allowing her to make her own choice. Before Imani could decide, a message arrived on Naomi's phone. She glanced at it, then looked up with renewed purpose. "My mother, Eva Montgomery, was also profiled by your staff today," she announced to the assembled airline representatives. "She collapsed after being forced to stand unnecessarily by your security personnel, despite her obvious physical limitations." This revelation caused another ripple of shock through the crowd. Naomi continued, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "She just sent me a statement from her hospital bed, documenting years of similar treatment from this airline and others." As these developments unfolded, Leslie attempted to slip away, edging toward the exit. Jordan noticed and alerted his father with a subtle nod. Darius's voice cut through the commotion like a blade. "Leslie Matthews." She froze, then slowly turned back to face him. "Your employment with Northern Skies Airlines is terminated, effective immediately," Darius stated, his tone leaving no room for appeal. "You've failed this company and its values. You're done." A spontaneous cheer erupted from the crowd of onlookers, many of whom had experienced or witnessed similar discrimination during their own travels. Leslie's face flushed with humiliation as security personnel approached to escort her from the premises. As she was led away, Jordan caught her eye for a brief moment. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only a solemn acknowledgement of consequence. With the attention of the entire terminal now focused on Gate A17, Darius delivered his final bombshell. "As of this moment, I am shutting down Northern Skies Airlines operations for 48 hours, he announced. "During this time, we will conduct a full audit of the airline's hiring practices, customer service protocols, and management structure. Those found to have engaged in discriminatory behavior will be removed. Those who stood by and allowed it to happen will be retrained or reassigned." The terminal erupted in a mixture of applause and concerned murmurs from affected travelers. "Passengers will be rebooked on partner airlines at our expense," Darius continued, anticipating their concerns. "Hotel accommodations will be provided for those with significant delays. This is not about punishing our customers. It's about ensuring that when operations resume, every passenger can expect to be treated with the dignity and respect they deserve, regardless of the color of their skin." As his father addressed the crowd, Jordan noticed something unexpected. Travis standing alone now with tears streaming down his face. The man's tough exterior had cracked, revealing something broken underneath. For a moment, Jordan felt an unexpected pang of empathy. Imani, ever observant, followed her brother's gaze and whispered, "People are complicated, even the ones who hurt us." Jordan nodded slowly, the truth of her words sinking in. Maybe that's the hardest part of all this, knowing that they're just people, making terrible choices. As Darius concluded his address and began fielding questions from the press, Jordan and Imani found themselves at the center of a story that was already spreading across social media and news outlets nationwide. Their private humiliation had become a public reckoning, their personal pain transformed into a catalyst for change. And somewhere in the crowd, Leo smiled quietly to himself, knowing that the evidence he had been collecting for years had finally found its way to people who could use it to make a difference. The crowd at Gate A17 had grown from dozens to hundreds. Travelers with delayed flights, curious airport staff, and an increasing number of media personnel formed a semicircle around the impromptu confrontation. Darius Franklin stood at the center of it all, an imposing figure whose presence commanded the terminal. "For those just joining us," Darius addressed the crowd, his voice carrying effortlessly, "I'd like to speak with someone in charge of gate operations." His eyes fixed directly on Travis, who still stood frozen several feet away. Travis stepped forward reluctantly, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "As I said, I'm the floor supervisor for this terminal, sir." Darius approached him slowly, stopping just close enough to make Travis uncomfortable. "Then you're the person who instructed your staff to racially profile my children?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Several phones rose higher to capture the exchange. Travis's mouth opened and closed before he found his voice. "Sir, we were following protocol for suspicious—" "Suspicious?" Darius cut him off. What exactly was suspicious? About two teenagers with valid first-class tickets? Before Travis could respond, Darius turned toward the crowd. "Would anyone like to guess what made my children appear suspicious?" Silence fell across the terminal. "I'll tell you what made them suspicious," Darius continued, his voice dangerously quiet. "The same thing that has made me suspicious in stores, in restaurants, and yes, in airports, despite the fact that I own this airline." He paused. "The color of their skin." Jordan and Imani stood slightly behind their father, watching the confrontation unfold. Jordan maintained his composure, but Imani fidgeted nervously, uncomfortable with the growing spectacle. "You work for me," Darius reminded Travis. "Every employee in this airline works for me, and yet my children were treated like criminals in my own establishment." Naomi Jackson, positioning herself at an optimal angle, continued recording as her cameraman captured the confrontation. She had been tipped off by Leo, and her journalistic instincts told her this story was bigger than one incident. "Mr. Franklin," she called out, "would you say this is an isolated incident or part of a pattern?" Darius glanced toward her, recognizing the strategic nature of the question. "Ms. Jackson, I believe your mother could answer that better than I could." Naomi's professional demeanor faltered slightly at the direct reference to her relationship with Eva. She hadn't realized he knew. "For those unaware," Darius continued, "Ms. Montgomery, who was mistreated by the same staff earlier today, is the mother of this journalist, the same staff who denied my children entry, then failed to accommodate an elderly woman with mobility issues." Travis attempted to interject. "Sir, the situation with Ms. Montgomery was handled by TSA, not our—" "Don't." Darius's single word cut through the air like a blade. Do not attempt to deflect responsibility when your staff stood by and watched an elderly woman collapse. During this exchange, Leslie had been trying to blend into the background, edging slowly toward an employee exit. Jordan noticed and subtly tapped his father's arm. "Leslie Matthews," Darius called without turning around. "Please join us. Your perspective as the first point of contact with my children would be valuable." Leslie froze, then reluctantly returned to the center of attention. Her customer service smile was firmly in place, though her eyes betrayed her fear. "Mr. Franklin," she began, her voice professionally modulated. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I was simply following standard procedure?" Jordan interrupted, stepping forward. He held up his smartwatch. "I recorded everything, including what you said when you thought we couldn't hear you." Leslie's smile faltered. Jordan tapped his watch, and Leslie's voice emerged clearly from the device. "What kind of rich dad lets their street kids run wild like this? Probably stole someone's credit card to book those tickets." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Leslie's face drained of color. Darius's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes hardened. "Ms. Matthews, in light of your comments and actions, your employment with Northern Skies is terminated, effective immediately." Leslie's professional mask cracked completely. "You can't just—" "I can and I have," Darius stated firmly. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings." As two security officers approached to escort Leslie away, cheers erupted from several onlookers. Leslie's humiliation was complete as she was led through the crowd, head down, avoiding the judgmental stares of passengers she'd once lorded over. Travis, witnessing Leslie's dismissal, attempted a different approach. "Mr. Franklin, our staff handles thousands of passengers daily. Mistakes happen, but we're not aggressive," Jordan interjected, playing another recording. Travis's voice filled the gate area. "They don't belong here. Make sure they're escorted out before they cause more trouble." Travis fell silent, his face ashen. Darius turned to his son with pride evident in his expression. "Your foresight saved us a lot of denials today." He returned his attention to Travis. Were you going to claim you weren't aggressive, Mr. Wilson, that you didn't prejudge my children based on their appearance? Travis, realizing his position was untenable, finally abandoned his defenses. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice hollow. Accountability, Darius replied simply, starting with an acknowledgement of what you did. While this confrontation unfolded, Imani stood slightly apart, observing not just the main players, but the reactions of those watching. She noticed how some passengers nodded in agreement with her father, while others looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing similar behaviors in themselves. She also saw the airline staff's varying reactions. Some were rightfully ashamed, others resentful, and a few seemed genuinely regretful. Her artistic eye captured these expressions, mentally sketching the complex emotions playing across faces throughout the terminal. This wasn't just about punishing Travis and Leslie. It was about confronting a deeper societal issue that played out daily in spaces like this. Naomi approached Imani while her father continued addressing the crowd. Would you be willing to share your perspective? She asked gently. People need to hear this from you too, not just your father. Imani hesitated, glancing toward Jordan, who gave her an encouraging nod. I'm not sure, she replied softly. Everyone's watching. That's precisely why your voice matters, Naomi responded. This isn't just about one airline or one incident. Before Imani could decide, her attention was drawn to her phone. A message had arrived from the medical center. Eva had recorded a statement from her hospital bed and sent it directly to Naomi. The journalist quickly reviewed the footage on her tablet. Eva's dignified voice captured the terminal's attention as Naomi played the recording. Today was not my first experience with discrimination while traveling, nor will it be the last for people who look like me. But today, something different happened. Today, someone with power finally said, "Enough." The crowd fell silent, listening to the elderly woman's testimony about decades of similar treatment, being redirected from first-class lines, subjected to random security checks, and having medical needs ignored or minimized. As Eva's recording concluded, Darius made his most dramatic announcement yet. In light of these revelations and the clear evidence of systemic issues within our company culture, I am temporarily shutting down Northern Skies Airlines operations. Shocked gasps spread through the terminal. Airline executives who had rushed to the scene looked horrified. For the next 48 hours, Darius continued, all Northern Skies flights worldwide will be grounded while we conduct a comprehensive audit of our hiring practices, customer service protocols, and management structure. One executive pushed forward. You can't do this. The financial implications are significant, Darius acknowledged, but not as significant as the human cost of allowing these practices to continue. He turned to address the worried passengers. All affected travelers will be rebooked on partner airlines at our expense, with appropriate compensation for delays. While chaos erupted among the executives, Jordan observed Travis standing alone, shoulders slumped in defeat. Despite everything, Jordan felt an unexpected twinge of empathy. The man had been cruel, yes, but he was also a product of a system that rewarded such behavior. In that moment, Jordan made a decision that would later prove significant. He approached Travis while everyone's attention was focused on his father. Why did you do it? Jordan asked quietly. Travis looked up, surprised by the direct question from the teenager he'd mistreated. Do what? Treat us like that. Without even checking our tickets first. You must have known there was a chance we were legitimate passengers. Travis held Jordan's gaze for a moment before looking away. You reminded me of someone, he admitted, his voice barely audible. My son. He was about your age when He trailed off, unable to finish. Before Jordan could respond, his father called for him. The conversation would have to wait. But something had shifted, a small crack in the wall between accuser and accused, a glimpse of the complicated humanity behind the discrimination. As security personnel began ushering airline staff away for questioning and processing, Darius put his arms around his children's shoulders. "You've both shown extraordinary courage today," he told them. "Your mother would be proud." Imani leaned into her father's embrace. "Do you think this will change anything, Dad? Really change things?" Darius looked down at his daughter, his expression softening. "Change doesn't happen overnight, sweetheart, but sometimes it needs a catalyst." He glanced around at the media recording every moment. "Today, we provided that catalyst." The image of the powerful black CEO standing with his teenage children in the middle of the airport terminal, having just grounded an entire airline over racial profiling, was already spreading across social media platforms nationwide. By morning, it would be international news. As they walked away from Gate A17, Jordan glanced back one last time. Travis was being escorted to a meeting room by Darius's staff, his future uncertain. Leslie was nowhere to be seen, and throughout the terminal, conversations about race, privilege, and accountability had begun among strangers who might never have discussed such topics otherwise. The Franklin family had turned a moment of humiliation into a reckoning, and this was just the beginning. The 48 hours following Darius, Franklin's announcement became known in aviation circles as the grounding. Northern Skies Airline stock plummeted 37% in the first day alone. Financial news channels ran continuous coverage of what analysts were calling unprecedented corporate self-regulation. In the glass-walled boardroom of Northern Skies headquarters, chaos reigned. Emergency meetings stretched through the night as executives strategized damage control. The CEO, William Palmer, had aged years in a single day, his usual tan fading to a sickly pallor. "He can't just shut us down," Palmer shouted, slamming his fist on the polished table. "We have shareholders to answer to." "He is the majority shareholder," the company's legal counsel reminded him quietly. "And the evidence he's presenting would sink us in court anyway." "What evidence?" demanded a senior vice president. "A few recorded comments? Some kid's smartwatch footage?" The room fell silent as the door opened. A young IT specialist entered looking nervous. "Sir, there's something you should know, the whistleblower. We've identified him." All attention turned to the specialist. "Well, who is it?" Palmer demanded. "Leo Rodriguez, a janitor. But he's not just a janitor. He's been systematically archiving deleted customer complaints for 3 years. Thousands of them, sir, all related to racial profiling incidents." The executives exchanged horrified glances. One woman closed her eyes briefly, whispering, "Those complaints were supposed to be permanently deleted." "Nothing's ever permanently deleted," the IT specialist replied grimly. And Rodriguez knew exactly what he was doing. He has copies of everything, including the internal memos directing staff to prioritize certain passenger profiles for additional screening. Palmer collapsed into his chair. "We're finished." Across town, in a modest apartment, Leo sat at his kitchen table with Naomi Jackson, reviewing the materials he'd collected over the years. "How did you know to start saving these?" Naomi asked, scrolling through meticulously organized files. Leo's expression darkened. 3 years ago, my grandmother was traveling to see me graduate. She's Dominican, doesn't speak much English. They pulled her aside, made her miss her connection. By the time she arrived, the ceremony was over. He shrugged. "I was already working here part-time. After that, I started paying attention." "And you kept working there? All this time?" Leo gave her a half-smile. "Sometimes you need to be inside the system to change it. I wasn't sure what I'd do with all this, but I knew. Someday the right opportunity would come along." "Well," Naomi said, "today's that day." She gestured to her laptop, where her preliminary story was taking shape. The headline read, "Systemic Discrimination Exposed. Whistleblower Reveals Years of Racial Profiling at Major Airline." Meanwhile, at the Franklin residence, a spacious penthouse with views of the city skyline, Jordan sat alone in his room, scrolling through the chaos unfolding online. Northern Skies shutdown was trending nationwide. Videos of the confrontation at the gate had been viewed millions of times, Some commenters hailed the Franklins as heroes exposing corporate racism. Others criticized Darius for what they called an overreaction and abuse of power. The most disturbing comments, however, were those attacking Jordan and Imani directly, calling them privileged, spoiled, and worse. Anonymous accounts were posting doctored videos, manipulating the footage to make it appear that the siblings had been aggressive or disrespectful. One particularly vicious post showed a crudely edited clip of Jordan shoving an airline employee, something that had never happened. Jordan's finger hovered over the video he'd recorded of Leslie mocking them. He hadn't shared this particular clip publicly yet. Part of him wanted to upload it immediately, to silence the critics who were painting him and Imani as entitled troublemakers. There was a soft knock at his door. Imani entered, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside him on the bed. Jordan showed her the doctored video. "They're trying to make us look bad." Imani studied the fake footage, then shook her head. "That's not even good editing. Your shirt changes color halfway through." Despite everything, Jordan laughed. Leave it to his artist sister to notice a detail like that. "I want to release the clip of Leslie," he admitted. "The one where she calls us street kids and says we stole credit cards." Imani frowned slightly. "Why haven't you?" "I don't know. I guess." Jordan hesitated. "It feels different now. She's already been fired. Everyone already knows what happened." "You're thinking about growth," Imani observed. "About giving people room to learn from their mistakes." Jordan looked surprised at his sister's insight. "Maybe, or maybe I just don't want to pour more fuel on the fire." Imani opened her sketchbook, showing him a drawing she'd been working on, a powerful rendering of Leslie's face, half in shadow, capturing both her cruelty and her humanity. "People aren't just one thing," Imani said quietly. "Dad says justice isn't about destruction, it's about correction." Jordan considered his sister's words. Then, making a decision, he uploaded the video anyway. "Some corrections need to be public," he said firmly, "for the others who might think twice next time." Imani looked disappointed, but didn't argue. Within minutes, the clip had been shared, thousands of times. Elsewhere in the city, in a luxury hotel suite serving as Darius's temporary command center, a different drama was unfolding. Reports of a potential board coup had reached him. Several executives were trying to rally votes to remove him as chairman, arguing that the shutdown constituted a breach of fiduciary duty. Darius received the news with calm detachment. "They're 3 votes short," he told his chief of staff. "And they always will be." "How can you be so sure, sir?" Darius smiled thinly. "Because the moment I learned what happened to my children, I transferred 15% of my shares to a trust controlled by loyalists. The board can't touch me now." His phone buzzed with a notification. Jordan had uploaded the video of Leslie's comments. Darius watched it once, his expression unreadable, then set the phone aside. "Sir?" his assistant prompted. "Should we include this in our press materials?" "No," Darius replied after a moment. "My son made his choice. We'll let it stand on its own." In a small supply closet at the airport terminal, Travis Wilson sat alone, his uniform jacket discarded on the floor beside him. Tears streamed down his face as he stared at an old photo on his phone, a teenage boy with his same eyes smiling at the camera. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he whispered to the image of his deceased son. "I've been so angry for so long." The door opened, suddenly, flooding the dark space with light. Naomi Jackson stood in the doorway, recorder in hand. "Mr. Wilson?" she said, surprised to find the supervisor in such a state. Travis quickly wiped his eyes, embarrassed to be caught crying. "What? Do you want more footage for your exposé?" Naomi studied him for a moment, then made a decision. She turned off her recorder and sat down on an overturned bucket across from him. "Tell me about it," she said simply. "Off the record. Just human to human." Travis looked up, confused by the unexpected compassion. Why would you listen to anything I have to say, after what I did? Because understanding why matters almost as much as acknowledging what, Naomi replied. And because my mother taught me that everyone deserves a chance to be heard. Something broke in Travis then. The defensive wall he'd maintained crumbled. Completely. I had a son, he began, his voice cracking. He would have been just about that boy's age now. As Travis spoke, Naomi listened without judgment. The story that emerged was one of loss, regret, and misdirected pain. A father who had failed his son, then projected that failure onto every young black man who reminded him of what he'd lost. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Darius had gone to visit Eva. He entered her room carrying a small arrangement of yellow roses. Mr. Franklin, Eva greeted him, sitting up straighter in her bed. I didn't expect a personal visit. Please, call me Darius, he replied, placing the flowers on her bedside table. I wanted to apologize personally for what happened today. Eva waved her hand dismissively. You're not responsible for every employee's actions. As majority owner? I am, Darius said firmly. But more importantly, I should have recognized how deep these issues went in my own company. Eva studied him thoughtfully. You know, when my daughter started reporting on corporate accountability, I told her to look for the ones who take responsibility, even when they could easily deflect it. Those are the ones who might actually change things. Darius smiled slightly. Your daughter is an impressive journalist. She reminds me of my Imani, sees right through to the heart of things. Their conversation was interrupted when Imani herself arrived, carrying her sketchbook. She hesitated in the doorway when she saw her father. Come in, sweetheart, Darius called. I was just telling Ms. Montgomery how much you remind me of her daughter. Imani approached shyly and handed Eva a sheet from her sketchbook, a beautiful drawing of Eva surrounded by young travelers of all backgrounds, her expression wise and dignified. This is how I see you, Imani explained softly. Teaching the next generation. Eva took the drawing with trembling hands, tears welling in her eyes. Child, you have a gift. Not just for art, but for seeing people as they could be, not just as they are. As Imani accepted the praise with a modest smile, Darius watched his daughter with newfound appreciation. In the midst of corporate collapse and public scandal, the quiet wisdom of a 14-year-old artist reminded everyone what truly mattered, seeing the humanity in each other, even when it was difficult. That evening, alone in his hotel room, Darius stood before the mirror, confronting his own reflection. The man who stared back at him was powerful, wealthy, and influential, everything he had fought to become since losing Layla. But had he become the very thing he'd sworn to fight, cold, ruthless, and detached? The question haunted him as he picked up a small photo he always carried, Layla holding newborn twins, her smile radiant despite her exhaustion. Am I doing this right? He whispered to her image. Is justice what we're achieving here, or just revenge? The photo, of course, offered no answers, but somewhere in the quiet room, Darius felt something shift within him, a determination that whatever came next would need to build something new, not just tear down the old. 3 weeks after the grounding, Northern Skies Airlines was no more. The familiar blue and silver livery had been replaced with a striking new design, deep purple with a golden phoenix rising across the tail. The name Layla Air now adorned every aircraft, ticket counter, and terminal gate formerly owned by Northern Skies. Darius Franklin stood at the newly renovated terminal, surveying the transformation. The reopening ceremony was scheduled to begin in an hour, and already the press was assembling. Jordan and Imani flanked their father, both dressed in formal attire that managed to look both professional and appropriate for their ages. Nervous? Darius asked his children. Jordan shook his head, but Imani nodded slightly. A little, she admitted. Everyone will be watching. Let them watch, Darius replied, squeezing her shoulder. What they'll see is how change should happen, not just in words but in actions. The terminal itself had been redesigned. Gone were the intimidating security checkpoints and isolated service desks. In their place stood open-concept customer service islands, staffed with diverse teams trained in cultural sensitivity. Security remained thorough but was conducted with transparency and respect. Most notably, every employee wore a badge that read, "Ask me why I'm here," a conversation starter that connected personal stories to professional service. Among those wearing such a badge was Leo Rodriguez, no longer pushing a janitorial cart. As the newly appointed head of ethical compliance, Leo now led a team responsible for ensuring that the airline maintained its commitment to equality and dignity. "Mr. Franklin," Leo greeted, approaching the family. "The new hires are ready for your inspection." Darius nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Leo. And please, it's Darius. We're colleagues now." Leo smiled. "That's still taking some getting used to." They walked together toward a group of new employees assembled nearby. Over 60% were from underrepresented communities, many hired from neighborhoods with high unemployment rates. Darius had personally overseen the creation of a training program that provided both technical skills and customer service expertise to those who had previously been overlooked by corporate recruiters. "Each of you represents the future of this company," Darius addressed the group. "Not just because of what you look like or where you come from, but because you understand that dignity isn't a luxury, it's a right." As Darius continued his speech, Jordan noticed a familiar face at the edge of the group. Travis Wilson stood slightly apart, no longer wearing a supervisor's badge but instead the same uniform as the other customer service representatives. His expression was subdued, humbled, yet there was a quiet determination in his stance. Jordan nudged Imani, nodding toward Travis. "Didn't expect to see him here." Imani studied Travis thoughtfully. "Dad believes in second chances, remember?" The siblings observed as their father concluded his address and moved through the group, shaking hands with each new hire. When he reached Travis, there was a moment of tension. Then Darius extended his hand, which Travis accepted with visible gratitude. Later, as the staff dispersed to prepare for the ceremony, Jordan approached Travis directly. "You're still here," Jordan stated, neither accusatory nor friendly, simply factual. Travis met his gaze steadily. "Your father offered me a choice, resign or stay and be part of the solution. Said it was up to me to decide which would do more good in the world. And you chose to stay," Travis nodded. "I'm starting over at the bottom. No authority, no ego, just learning to see people, really see them." He hesitated. "I never properly apologized to you and your sister." Jordan considered this. "No, you didn't." "I'm sorry," Travis said simply. "What I did was wrong. Not just that day, but every day I allowed bias to influence how I treated people." For a moment, Jordan said nothing, measuring the sincerity in Travis's eyes. "I heard about your son," he finally said. "That must have been hard." Something flickered across Travis's face. Surprise, pain, and then a quiet acceptance. "It was, still is, but it's no excuse for how I treated you." "No," Jordan agreed. "It's not, but it helps me understand." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a special guest. Eva Montgomery, elegant in a purple dress that matched the airline's new colors, was being wheeled toward the ceremonial ribbon by none other than Naomi Jackson, her daughter. "Ms. Montgomery," Darius greeted her warmly. "You honor us with your presence." Eva smiled. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Mr. Franklin. It's not often one gets to witness actual change instead of just talk about it." Darius turned to address all those gathered. "Today, we're not just renaming an airline. We're establishing a new standard for how businesses should operate, with accountability, with purpose, and with humanity at the center of every decision." The ribbon-cutting ceremony began with speeches from Darius, Eva, and surprisingly, Travis, who spoke candidly about his own journey from being part of the problem to committing to be part of the solution. His testimony was powerful precisely because it was uncomfortable, an admission of bias that many could recognize in themselves. As cameras flashed and reporters called out questions, Imani tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad, can I say something, too?" Darius looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, sweetheart." Imani stepped forward to the microphone, momentarily intimidated by the sea of faces. Then she took a deep breath and began speaking from the heart. "3 weeks ago, my brother and I were treated like we didn't belong," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But that moment wasn't just about us. It was about every person who's ever been made to feel small because of how they look or where they come from." The crowd fell silent, captivated by the 14-year-old's poise and wisdom. "I'm an artist," Imani continued, "and artists learn to really see people, not just their outsides, but who they are inside. That's what was missing that day. No one saw us as people first." She glanced at Travis. "But people can learn to see differently. They can change. And institutions can change too if there's enough courage to admit when they're wrong." As Imani returned to her father's side, the applause was thunderous. Darius embraced her, whispering, "Your mother would be so proud." The ceremony concluded with Darius, Jordan, and Imani cutting the purple ribbon together, officially launching Layla Air. As part of the rebranding, Darius announced several new initiatives: a scholarship program for minority students interested in aviation careers, a community oversight board with real authority to review customer complaints, and most significantly, a training program developed in partnership with Ava Montgomery to educate all staff on the impact of unconscious bias. Later that afternoon, Darius was summoned to a hearing on Capitol Hill. The Congressional Subcommittee on Transportation had taken notice of the Northern Skies shutdown and wanted to understand its implications for the industry at large. Under the bright lights of the hearing room, Darius spoke not just as a CEO, but as a father. "What happened to my children happens every day to people who don't have the power to shut down an airline in response," he testified. "The difference isn't in the problem, it's in who has the authority to demand a solution." His testimony shifted, the conversation from one about an individual company's practices to a broader examination of systemic issues across the transportation sector. Lawmakers from both parties found themselves unable to dismiss his arguments when confronted with the evidence, not just from the Franklin incident, but from thousands of similar cases documented by Leo over the years. Meanwhile, back at the EC, newly christened Layla Air Terminal, Leo was leading his first official training session for the ethical compliance team. The group included former customer service agents, security personnel, and even a few executives who had survived the corporate restructuring. "The goal isn't perfection," Leo explained. "It's awareness and correction. We're not trying to catch people doing something wrong. We're trying to build a culture where doing right becomes instinctive." At the back of the room, Naomi sat taking notes for a follow-up piece she was writing. What had begun as coverage of a scandal had evolved into an ongoing examination of corporate transformation. Her article series, From Grounding to Growing, The Layla Air Revolution, had been picked up by major publications nationwide. As word spread about the changes at Layla Air, other companies began taking notice. Competitor airlines scrambled to review their own policies, some genuinely committed to improvement, others merely trying to avoid similar public relations disasters. The ripple effects extended beyond the aviation industry. Hotels, rental car companies, and retail chains began examining their customer service practices through a new lens, aware that in the age of smartphones and social media, accountability was just a viral video away. At Darius's insistence, Travis was invited to speak at industry conferences about his personal journey, from enforcing biased policies to advocating for change. His testimony was particularly effective because he didn't portray himself as a hero, just as an ordinary person who had been forced to confront his own prejudices. The hardest part, Travis told one audience, wasn't losing my job or facing public shame. It was looking in the mirror and seeing that I'd become someone who made children feel unwelcome because of the color of their skin. Someone my own son would have been ashamed of. For Eva, the airline transformation brought unexpected opportunities. She was given a lifetime first-class membership with Layla Air. But more importantly, she was honored with a special ceremony naming the new accessibility program after her, the Montgomery Protocol for Dignity in Travel. In my 73 years, Eva remarked during the ceremony, I've seen boycotts and protests, lawsuits and regulations, all necessary, all important. But what's happening here is different. It's transformation from the inside out. As the weeks passed, the Franklin family began to heal from both the recent incident and the older wounds reopened by it. Darius, who had immersed himself in work since Layla's death, finally took time off. He rented a quiet cabin in the mountains where he, Jordan, and Imani could reconnect away from the public eye. During those peaceful days among the pines, they talked openly about Layla for the first time in years. Not just how she died, but how she lived. Darius shared stories the children had been too young to remember, while they showed him their own ways of keeping her memory alive. Jordan through his protective nature, Imani through her art. She would have handled that day at the airport differently than I did, Darius admitted one evening as they sat by the fire. Less corporate takeover, more human connection. You did what you knew how to do, Dad, Imani said gently. You protected us. Jordan nodded in agreement. And you made sure it wouldn't happen to anyone else. Maybe, Darius mused. But I wonder if we could have achieved the same result with less scorched earth, Jordan suggested with a wry smile. Darius chuckled. Exactly. I think Mom would say it's not about what happened that day, Imani reflected. It's about what happens next, what we build from here. 6 months after the rebranding of Layla Air, Naomi Jackson stood in the terminal preparing for the final segment of her documentary series. The working title, Grounded, What It Took to Change an Airline, had resonated with viewers nationwide. We're rolling in 3, 2, 1, her cameraman counted down. 6 months ago, I stood in this same terminal recording a confrontation that would ultimately change the aviation industry, Naomi began, looking directly into the camera. Today, I'm here to show you the aftermath, not just new logos and fresh paint, but fundamental changes in how people are treated when they travel. The closing scene of her documentary showed Jordan and Imani Franklin walking confidently through the terminal, no longer anxious or defensive, but moving with the assurance of belonging. The impact of the Northern Skies incident had rippled far, beyond American borders. International airlines had launched their own internal reviews, fearful of similar reckonings. Darius had been invited to consult with transportation ministries across Europe and Asia, sharing the Layla Air model as a template for change. The irony, Darius told a conference in Geneva, is that treating people with dignity isn't just morally right, it's good business. Our customer satisfaction scores are at record highs, employee turnover has plummeted, and our stock has not only recovered, but reached new peaks. Back in their hometown, Imani had found her own voice through art. Her first gallery showing, a series called Gatekeepers, featured symbolic depictions of airports, security checkpoints, and waiting areas. Places where power dynamics often played out in subtle but significant ways. I'm not trying to shame anyone, she explained to visitors at the opening. I'm trying to make visible what's usually invisible, the tiny moments, when we decide who belongs and who doesn't. The exhibition attracted attention from art critics, but more importantly, it sparked conversations among ordinary visitors about their own experiences with inclusion and exclusion. One installation, a recreation of the first-class check-in counter with distorted proportions and perspectives, was particularly powerful in helping people understand how intimidating such spaces could feel to those made unwelcome. Jordan, meanwhile, had channeled his technical skills into creating something constructive. Inspired by his experience at the airport, he had developed a travel app designed to protect vulnerable passengers. The platform, called SafePass, allowed users to record interactions, access rights information specific to their location, and connect with advocacy resources if needed. Technology shouldn't just make travel more convenient, Jordan explained at the app's launch. It should make it more equitable. His startup had attracted major investors who recognized both the social value and market potential of addressing an underserved need. What had begun as a response to personal injustice was evolving into a tool that could help thousands navigate challenging situations with greater confidence. Even Leslie Matthews, the gate agent whose discriminatory actions had helped trigger the entire chain of events, experienced unexpected growth in the aftermath. Initially bitter about her termination, she had been required to perform community service as part of a settlement agreement with Layla Air. Her assignment, assisting elderly and disabled passengers at a local bus terminal, had been deliberately chosen to place her in service to those she had previously dismissed. At first, she'd approached the work with resentment, but a chance encounter changed her perspective. An elderly black woman, struggling with her bags, had reminded Leslie powerfully of Eva Montgomery. Something shifted in Leslie that day. Not a dramatic redemption, but a small crack in the wall of defensiveness she'd built. It wasn't a Hollywood ending, but it was a realistic beginning to a different way of seeing the world. 7 months after the incident, Eva Montgomery passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her funeral drew thousands, not just family and friends, but people whose lives she had touched through her decades of advocacy. She was remembered not as a victim, but as a warrior who had fought with dignity for the respect all people deserve. "My mother never sought the spotlight," Naomi said in her eulogy. "But when it found her, she used it to illuminate the path for others." In honor of Eva's legacy, Imani wrote an open letter to the airline staff who had mistreated them that fateful day. Rather than focusing on their actions, she addressed the humanity behind them. "I don't know what experiences shaped you," she wrote. "I don't know what fears or pressures influenced your choices, but I do know that we all have the capacity to see each other more clearly, to recognize the dignity in every person we encounter. That recognition isn't the end of the journey, it's just the beginning." The letter went viral, praised for its maturity and compassion coming from someone so young. Educational consultants reached out to Imani, asking permission to use her words in training materials for schools and businesses, addressing unconscious bias. Darius, watching his daughter's growing influence, felt a complex mixture of pride and humility. His own approach, leveraging power and financial pressure, had created the conditions for change, but it was Imani's compassion and Jordan's innovation that were building something sustainable. In recognition of this truth, Darius published a memoir titled Runways and Roadblocks, chronicling his journey from grief to accountability. The book was unflinching in its examination of his own failures and blind spots, alongside his successes in creating institutional change. "Power can dismantle barriers overnight," he wrote in the final chapter, "but only understanding can prevent new ones from being built." A year after Eva's passing, Layla Air established the annual Eva Justice Award, given to frontline workers who exemplified dignity, inclusion, and courage in their daily interactions. The first recipient was, surprisingly, a former Northern Skies employee who had risked her job to help stranded passengers during the shutdown. At the awards ceremony, Darius, Jordan, and Imani presented the honor together, no longer just a grieving family seeking justice, but partners in creating a more equitable world. And in the renovated terminal that now bore Layla Franklin's name, a subtle but meaningful change had taken place. The traditional first-class economy division had been reimagined. While premium services remained available, the physical architecture of the space no longer reinforced hierarchies of worth. Every passenger, regardless of ticket type, was processed with the same baseline of respect. On the wall overlooking the check-in area hung a mural commissioned by Darius. The painting depicted Layla, Jordan, and Imani, not as idealized figures, but as real people with warm, knowing smiles. And beneath them, a new generation of travelers. Black, white, disabled, young, old, rich, poor, moved through the space with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you belong. The plaque beside the mural carried a simple message: everyone's journey matters. 5 years later, that message had spread far beyond a single airline or terminal. What had begun as a painful confrontation had catalyzed conversations and changes across industries and borders. The term Franklin Standard had entered the business lexicon, referring to corporate policies that addressed bias not just in theory but in practice. For Jordan and Imani, now young adults pursuing their own paths, the airport incident remained a pivotal moment in their lives, not just because of what had happened to them, but because of what they had helped create from it. They had learned that justice wasn't just about righting wrongs, but about building systems where wrongs became less likely in the first place. And for travelers everywhere, something fundamental had shifted. Not overnight, not completely, but meaningfully. The journey toward true equity continued, but each step forward carried the legacy of those who had refused to accept anything less than dignity, for themselves and for everyone who would come after them. What happens when we grant the power of accountability to those who've been silenced? What changes might occur in our world if every silent sufferer had the means to demand justice? If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives that challenge us to examine privilege, power, and the possibility of transformative change.